I am traveling to you from the Seattle area, so it's just 4 in the afternoon. Another part that I just want to say, what what a wonderful video that was shown up there beforehand. I truly appreciate it. That was gave me a good slice of Matthews. I wish I could have been there for some of those events. So tonight we're going to talk. I'm a cavity nesting bee person. Okay, so we're going to talk about mason, the spring, and leafcutter summer cavity nesting bees. And so through let me just see, there we go. So through tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about bee basics, mason and leaf. Crown Bees isn't just a company that sells stuff. We've got some programs. We collaborate. I want to talk about why we collaborate. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about some cool science things that we're working on. That what's nice about this, the audience that Daniel was telling me is you all are not just beginning people, you're a step above. And so I'm talking probably a higher level where we normally go. So if you don't mind, in a couple slides, I'm going to ask you to pull out your smartphone. So do so now. There's going to be a QR code I want to show you. So just, it's going to be in a couple slides. About us. My company is bee focused. We started back last recession. I lost my job in a big old company and started the mason bee industry. That's kind of now going. I'm no longer the president for that, but we're cavity nesting bee focused. Science drives this. We work with Cornell, Wisconsin, the USDA. We collaborate heavily. The rising tide floats all boats is a mantra that we use. We educate heavily. It's you probably could call my website Wiki Mason Bee. We care. The products that we do sell. I'm an Eagle Scout by a long time ago, and you've got to be a good citizen to the planet. So everything we make is local. We have to have things that work for as low as price we can, and the bees that we push out to the country have to be bees that work, and we're customer focused. We answer our phone, we care. So there's that. Okay, so for your smartphone, pull this out and look at this page. Okay, this is the if I was going to put a test at the end of this session, all of the answers to the test are on this page. Okay, be knowledgeable. So if you flip through any one of these I'm going to call them little links, they're going to teach you every single thing you can know. So I'm just going to reiterate what's out there. Okay, now this is probably, I'm also going to flip through some slides pretty quickly. Some things are pretty basic. There's an awful lot of species of bees out there. I think most people think there's just 5. The honeybee, the bumblebee, all hornets, all wasps, and everything else. And if you were to ask the public, well, how many honey producing native bees are there? Few people actually say there are no honey producing native bees. Yeah, the honeybee came across with the Pilgrims back in the 1400s. All other bees are just pollinating bees. Surprisingly, so the social honeybees, bumblebees, and most of them are solitary. And the difference between them, when you're playing with the social, there is one queen, one hive. If you kick a hive, expect to get stung. They're there protecting the queen and the eggs and honey. And I really think the honeybee is one of the most sophisticated insects out there. Such great communication, such spreading of tasks. What an awesome insect. And you look at the solitary bees, a little more basic. Every female is a queen. And they don't, on the solitary side, they don't have any hive to defend, so they don't. I mean, you can get stung. If you have a bee in your hand, you squish your hand down, she's going to sting you, say, hey, don't squish me. But the venom in a solitary bee, there are no known cases of anaphylactic shock that I or the researchers have found. So very gentle. And the females do everything. So they're gathering the pollen, they lay the eggs, they seal the chambers. They're there for just a bit. And to kind of summarize a busy slide, bees, all bees, and butterflies, and everyone plays. They have an aspect of our ecosystem. If we don't have and protect these vast amounts of insects out there, we're really doing a disservice to not only humanity, but to the planet. So yeah, bees are important. Just some characteristics. This is a blue orchard bee. It's found there in North Carolina. It looks just like a fly, okay? So many people say, oh, no, it's not a fly. The antennas are different. This is a, different eyes, different, wing structure, etc. But around you, there is a up and coming. It's not invasive. It's naturalized. You'll find mostly brown mud using mason bees around you. Very similar to characteristics. They've got a stinger, super hairy bodies. The pollen is gathered all over them. Big eyes. They've got 3 eyes on the tops of their heads that I have a picture. Yeah, you can see these 3 eyes help the bees navigate. They see filtered UV through the atmosphere. And the life cycle. Almost all bees, including social bees, live about 6 weeks. In a honeybee hive, 1,500 eggs are laid a day, 1,500 bees roughly die a day. They live about 6 weeks. And so there's 2 different life cycles. We're going to talk about the mason bee life cycle now. This is a spring bee. It overwinters in a little cocoon. This is all the feces that the larva had back there. As it was a larva, it spun its cocoon and kind of kicked that stuff out. But they're going to emerge depending where you are. Down in the southeast, probably March or so. In the northeast, maybe late April. But they come out when the dandelions are typically there. They mate. The boys are dead in just a couple of weeks. Man, they did their job. The females are carrying that sperm with them. And as they're out there gathering their pollen, sealing these chambers, they're putting about maybe 25 to 30 trips worth of pollen back into a hole in that backside. They lay an egg and then seal that chamber with something, okay? The mud-using bee uses mud. So if you have no mud in your backyard, you're probably not going to have a mud-using bee. There are bees that use tree resin and fluff from flowers and masticated vegetation, and sometimes there's pebbles. So all of these things, are there to separate that chamber. Those eggs hatch, become larvae, and slowly through the summer become an adult bee just to start their principal life again. And I'm going to skip. So here's very close in. You're seeing this is the egg. Looks about a grain of rice back there. And this is about maybe 25 to 30 trips worth of pollen and nectar. Makes this little bee bread back there. And then that chamber here, that mud chamber sealing, is probably 12 or so trips worth of mud. And then really as that larva's consuming it, they become a bigger bug larva, and then begin spinning their cocoons probably mid-June or so. And by August, they are an adult bee. So they've just kind of metamorphosed through there. Okay, so there is kind of down and dirty. That's simple life cycle of the mason bee. Okay, so Mary, any questions out there? And it's fine to not have any, just want to answer them now. And so you're muted, Mary, so I'm going to say there's none.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The first question we have is, the photos of the mason bee houses show the channels as round or tubes. Do the bees care if the channel is basically square? It's a lot easier to cut the channels in wood with a
dado blade. Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
In a table. Okay.
So great question. The bees will typically use what they can. They're a little less efficient because uh, there's more surface in the corners. So they'll probably be one or two less eggs laid, but yeah, that works. And branches that have been drilled out in the yard, there's a lot of solutions for that. Another question?
No, that was the last question right now.
Okay. So now, this is probably the most important piece that I've got. Understanding the difference in how they pollinate. If you look at this mason bee, the pollen is gathered dry. She's belly flopped into a flower. She just crams her body into that flower. Next flower, crammed in again, just belly flop, boom. And most of the pollen is being spread. So this is a pollen spreading bee. Okay, your honeybees are super sophisticated. 1,500 eggs are laid a day, 1,500 mounds are needed a day. And so this bee has evolved to carry their pollen sticky on hind legs. I spoke with Dr. Eric Musson, UC Davis, a few years ago. He said, Dave, this isn't pollen, that's just bee food. And the part that's pollinated, if you can see on a slide out there, this little grain right here, just a few little grains that the bees missed, this is the pollen being spread. And so that's very different when, what most people consider. And the second characteristics are the mason bees tend to be very meandering. Rarely do they stay on a tree. I've hit a tree, I'm over here, hit a tree, I'm over here. So in their 30-minute circuit through an orchard or through a yard, they wind back up at their house, but they've just gone everywhere. Whereas a honeybee, because every grain of pollen is needed, they're very hive to source, gather off that tree, that same limb, work the next limb, back to the source or back to the hive, and then again, until finally all the pollen is gone. So you don't get a lot of cross-pollination in orchards. Where you make up for it actually is, when you have two hives, it's roughly 120, 80,000, 120,000 bees in an acre. They'll make it for, that's where their pollen's being spread. In comparison, we're putting 400 females in cherry fields compared to that many, two hives, and getting almost triple the yield, double the yield with apples. Strawberries, you're getting 40% more. Almonds, you're getting 25% more. So it's just surprising. Today, very, very, very few farmers consider anything but a honeybee because I think that's all they know. But and it is where it is today. But we're seeing increased scientifically. You're seeing just more pollination happening there. This is an important piece. Any questions on this one, Mary?
Right. Yeah, Dave, this is Michelle. I'm here on site. I'm just curious to know how you transport the solitary bees to these orchards to do the pollination for the farmers.
It is different. The honeybee is often, carried by trucks and forklift into there. As we're working with orchards, they're mailed in cocoon form. They're only able to be used really on one field because they're going to spend their whole life there. And so they're dropped in and spread through the orchard. So we're typically putting maybe 10,000 bees per 10 acres. And we release them in white PVC pipes, and or put them on pizza boxes on top of hives, and the heat of the hives gets the cocoons going, and they're just out. And so I would say they're distributed by pizza boxes. Good question. That was technical, but that's what we do.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions right now.
Good. This is a messy statement. That there is an awful lot of mess that all of these typically are human-based challenges. Habitat loss, it's not only loss of flowers and pollen that used to be there, replaced by roads and monoculture, but it's also the homes that the bees used to sit in. No one has a scaggy tree in their backyard because they don't want to fall in on their yard. And those scaggy trees had holes in it for the bees to use. Or there's a lot of lawn that's out there that don't really allow your ground nesters to go inside there. So it's an issue. I don't think I need to say much about sides, whether it's pesticide or insecticides. They'll talk about a study later on. There's more than one bee in the world to a lot of us, but to the companies that hold the patents and sell the products, there's only one bee, and they predominantly, I'm going to say only, study on the one bee. And Dr. Bidinger out at Penn State a couple of years ago showed, like, here's a fungicide study that he had 5 different fungicides, and he had here's how they are the lethality to a mace or to a honeybee, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then put bumbus out there, bumblebees, and found, oh wow, you know, this one's safe for the bumblebee, but this one, where it was easy for the honeybee, is risky. And the mason bees out there were 3, 2, 4, 1, whatever, completely jumbled. And so what, you know, what the statement is when we think through what's risky for our pollinators, it absolutely is more than just a honeybee. Introduce these diseases by us with our commercial honeybee practices. As we move the honeybees out to the almond industry, and then from there you follow the flow of pollen and nectar up into Washington State and across down to peaches. When you look at all bees, you know, 3 million hives in one tight area, the spread of diseases is phenomenal. And those bees carry those diseases back to wherever they are. And so you release whatever diseases might not have been a honeybee disease, but through that massive amount of spreading diseases, they're then pushed across the country. And, you know, I'm going to say, what did we do to the natives a long time ago? Spreading our cholera and, you know, smallpox. It's just devastating to bees out there. And so through our migration of the honeybee, it's a mess. And even we take, we'll talk about pests in a bit. We take mason bees and move them from, my company doesn't, but others are spreading whatever bugs we have inside our reeds. We're going to send them to our friends out there in New York. And now all of a sudden our friends out there in New York have pests that weren't there. They were more of a Seattle pest, and now they're in New York. And so even in the backyard, the do-gooders of just spreading a good bee are spreading a lot of things out there as well. And then we'll talk a little bit more about climate change. It's a mess, just and it's well, we'll talk. It's kind of real messy. Here's how-tos, and I'm going to shorten this slide. Okay, what I showed you on my website, you know, crownbees.com, and under the Be Knowledgeable, we have specifically why, you know, getting bees that are regionalized to you, a yard, you know, what needs to be inside there, what's necessary, how to put things up, how to install them. All of this is on hidden slides, but you can easily find those. And actually, to even shorten this, at the bottom of any one of our web pages is a thing called Bee Mail. And it's Kim, she's a really good writer. We just say, hey, it's October, do this precisely. Hey, it's January, do these things. And so throughout the year, I don't know, we probably have a good 33,000 followers that once a month, they just get little tidbits. Sometimes it's twice a month, but we say, you know, do this. Here's a little bit of science. Here's some things we're selling. But it's specifically for you guys just to learn what to do. So a couple things on bees. Be very wary. The Industry Orchard Bee Association that I got going years ago, if you don't hold cocoons in your hands, so these are called loose cocoons, if you don't hold them in your hands, there's just pests that go with you. So if you're buying or moving reeds of bees from point A to point B, don't, really don't. Unharvest, so open these things, harvest bees and spread cocoons. That's why it's just they're cleaner. And then if you're gonna get bees sourced to you, be careful. The bees that we have for the Carolinas are raised in Tennessee or the Carolinas. So it's in an ecoregion that the bees are already acclimated to your turf. For me to go give you a Northwestern bee down to the Southeast, one, I'm doing the bee a disservice, and then two, I'm setting you up for failure. The bees might work in your yard in the spring, but your temperatures during the summer are different than how the bee was raised, and you wind up having dead bees in the winter. So it's, I just be careful. My company cares. There's a couple companies that care out there. And really shortening this whole piece up, a mud using bee that's carrying, that needs mud, if you were to not have any mud in your yard, guess what happens? That bee that you purchased or that you're looking for isn't there. So similarly, if I'm in a desert and I've got holes out and I've got bees that use cactus pulp, so pollen, egg, cactus pulp. If I took that cactus pulp using bee and moved it out to the Carolinas, it's probably gonna have a tough time nesting in your yard. Okay, so this is, if you don't have mud, all right, we've got mud. I mean, it's a simple thing and it just goes in the ground and we kind of teach you what to do. And then lastly, I appreciated that you're talking about chemicals and pesticides and stuff. We've learned that your social bees typically can fly through toxic stew. They have to get all the grains of pollen, and so they're a little more robust. Whereas your natives, it's not that it kills them, but if your neighbor upwind of you is out there putting, used to be called Chemlon, nowadays they're putting maybe True Green on that guy's yard, the downwind plume of that stench has most of the solitary bees just flying away. They just know it's not right. And so where you might have had bees nesting, your neighbor is impacting your yard. And so one of the things we do is we have little pamphlets that you can download and print off and hand to your neighbors lovingly. Hey, I'm putting my bees out. Please, please, refrain from using chemicals. Okay, so that's kind of, I shortened it a lot. There's, house should be up on a morning facing wall, about head height, how to put your bees out, because I have a lot of other things to say. So do you have any questions out there? I mean, I can answer them, just I'm cutting short 20 minutes here, Mary.
What issues or pests are we looking for on the cocoons?
I think, I just said that. Yes, I will talk about that. That'll be a slide forward. Okay. Any other questions?
Looks like we have one that says, do the front of the bee house holes need a pattern painted on to help them find their specific holes?
Great question. Okay. So this is, small bees use small holes, okay? Large bees use large holes. So there's a first little lesson. Around you, you might have Osmium pumila. Thing that heads down the southeast and it goes in a 3 millimeter, like an 1/8 of an inch hole, very small bee. And you've got Osmium bucephala that goes in. These are 8 millimeter holes. I think they prefer like a 10 millimeter. So size of hole matters. If you ask the bee what they want, okay, here's the analogy is someone says, hey, Dave, where do you live? And I point behind me, I say, oh, I'm on the 8th floor of that apartment complex, 7th door down. You start doing this and counting with your fingers. I say, oh, wait, I'm the blue door with the red trim. And your eyes go bunk right to my door, okay? This is why we burnish the wood trays, just to kind of create a little pattern so they can find it. But this is very homogeneous, and we'll find that a bee will go in here and then back out, and then this one, and then back out, and then finally, like the third or the second one, they say, oh yeah, this is my hole. They smell it with their antennas, and they say, it smells like me, and then they'll go use it. Whereas with reeds, every reed is unique, and the bees will typically just fly right in, and back out. rarely do they miss their hole. And your paper tubes that are useful, you know, probably lowest cost, to put sticks or something between the paper tubes maybe helps the bees orient a bit. We have a new thing called wayfinders where we put, there's colored little sticks that might help the bees out. So if you ask the bee, I want to go here, and then a messy over here, and lastly I'll go here. But this is the consumable, and these are a little expensive. The inserts that you're using are you know, lower cost, and this is most expensive up front, but reusable for year and year. So that's kind of the walk. And then when you're creating a little house, having a little overhang we think is good. So there's a little porch. The bees will come out and just kind of nest, or your nest, in the mornings. They'll either sit on the front of their nesting holes, or they'll sit down here on the very front ledge. And the morning bird gets the worm, or the sitting mason bee just is. So we also have bird guards on a lot of our pieces. Do avoid things that you can't open up. Drilled blocks of wood, we're going to talk a bit about the pests that we see. Drilled blocks of wood, that's how I started 20 some years ago. My wife came home from a class she was in, she goes, oh my gosh, I was at this person's house and it just, their apple tree was just loaded with apples. And our apple tree, huge apple tree, had like 5 on it. I said, well, go find out what they did. And so she comes back, she goes, they have mason bees. I said, what's a mason bee? And so I went out and drilled holes in a little 2x4. And next, you know, that spring, all of a sudden I had a couple of holes filled up, and then slowly started, and then within 2 or 3 years, I had apples on my trees. It was just like that. And all of a sudden, you know, the engineer in me starts opening things up. I'm holding cocoons, and then, you know, it goes past that. But do avoid just drilled blocks of wood. And bamboo, typically, there's some cheap stuff from China that's bamboo. You can get it at Costco and stuff. If you can't open them, be wary, because we're gonna go past that into diseases. And so here's some gross things. This is Ascafera, it's called chalkbrood, the common name. But you start with a little mason bee. This is a very friable surface. This is there's a couple little grains of this disease that a mason bee picked up, dropped off in her pollen loaf, or it could have been left on the inside of the wall from the house. But as that larva consumes a couple little grains, that larva and that Ascafera, this chalkbrood, man, kills the bee. And then all of a sudden you got this big tent, it's real friable, of this spore around it, and it stays there in that chamber like that. And a visiting bee, or a bee leaving in the spring, plows past this, has it all over her wings and her fur, and she spreads it up and down the hole. It's out in the flowers, and if you do nothing, if you can't get to this disease just spreads. Chalkbrood. Pollen mites. This is if you're in a moist environment, you guys are, in your yard are pollen mites, and their job is they eat pollen. Okay. And so when you get mason bees and you bring the mason bee, she's gathered her pollen, and in that pollen are pollen mites. And she brings them back into that chamber. Man, what a pile of pollen. And so they just consume the pollen, they just stay there. And it's not that big of a deal, but oops. I didn't mean that. In the springtime, those pollen mites there change to be adults and piggyback on a bee, and off they go, spread into the yard. And you know, it is just part of nature, but it's like, you know, if you don't want to spread too many things, then, you know, clean your stuff, and, you know, you'll learn how to harvest. Parasitic wasps go through thin walls, and when you drop your ovipositor through there and you lay your eggs next to a larva in there, man, what a great pile of food. What an awesome thing. And so here's something you're nervous about. And this last one, 5 years ago, we raised an awful lot of bees in the Northwest. And we found these little maggots in one of the chambers. I said, gosh, you know, we have hundreds of thousands of bees being raised for us. And we saw 3 or 4 of what's this? And then the next year we saw a lot of what's this? And the third year, about 3 years ago, oh my gosh, what's this is in maybe, you know, 0.5% of all of our trays from 2 hours north to 2 hours south. And I brought these down to the convention with my peers, and 2 Swiss guys looked at that and started laughing. Well, what's wrong? I said, oh, that's the Houdini fly. It's all throughout Europe, and it's the bane of Europe, and it's just this nasty ass little, it's a fruit fly. And without any predators here in the Northwest, it just spreads and spreads and spreads. And so now this fly is in probably 15%. So if I'm raising maybe, I don't know, I'm going to get 300,000 bees back normally, I've lost 45,000 bees to this fly because other people in the Northwest just drill blocks of wood and they don't care. And this fly just runs rampant, and it's now from BC down through Oregon. And lovingly, people have taken this, the mason bees from, hey, here's Aunt Matilda, here's a, you know, here's a filled reed, go put this in your backyard. And so now we know that it's in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and it's just spreading. And the answer is, I just today was talking with the lead researcher in Washington State. What can we do to learn about this? Who do we talk to in the USDA to stop this from wiping out our bees? And it's like, at this point, so, okay, this is why you harvest cocoons. And my website, we teach you, we have videos, you're opening reeds up, you're tossing your inserts into warm water and the glue dissolves, and you're holding cocoons in your hands, and you're just kind of washing them, and you're just kind of separating gross things from cute little cocoons that you're storing in the fridge. Okay, so there's kind of life cycle-y, and this is the end of the how-tos with a mason bee. Mary, any questions? No questions means I was clear.
I don't see any questions thus far, so I think
Okay.
you worked. Thank
And
you.
and again, this is all on our website, and you'll find this during the email. And then actually, it's one of the things we care about is we have people, we source our bees from all across the country. So right now, if you buy bees from us, we've brought them in, we've paid people cash, we've exchanged goods from our store for these cocoons from everywhere. We clean them, remove all the stuff. We're storing them by regions in our coolers. And then we specifically, as someone from New York ask for bees, we're sending them out New York bees. So it's just important for us. That's just one of our little programs. Okay, change the subjects. Leaf cutters. It's very, very similar. You've got leafcutter species all through all through North America. And, so there's, most of them are ground dwellers, probably 75% of these are leafcutters or ground dwellers. And then a lot of them nest in cavities. So the little different coloration, still have stingers, they're still a gentle bee, they're solitary, they're typically a white abdomen, typically. They're a smaller bee, but the same characteristics, carrying their pollen loosely on the underside of them, belly flop in. Their jaws are typically pretty strong, pretty sharp. If you get a bunch of, we saw these bees, and you're releasing them, if one goes down your back by accident, which happens, and you might get bit. It's more, hey, and they'll reach through mandibles, and no one likes to have a little pair of snippers go. So if you're releasing bees, I typically would have more of a tight collar or something. And it kind of goes with being, holding bees. Little different life cycle. They overwinter as pupa. So through the spring, they shift from spring to early June. They're moving within 3 to 4 weeks at 84 degrees. This is precise. It's a very well-known bee. At 84 degrees for 21 days, boom to boom. And then males are emerging like a couple of days before the females are. They go out there and they mate, the males are gone. They're gathering their pollen, carrying leaf bits back, okay? And when they're laying these leaves down, typically smaller holes, this is like a 6 millimeter versus an 8. There's little chambers in here where they seal the differences between chambers. And here's the little pupa inside there during the summer, consumes all the pollen and nectar, and then sits there and then just stays, typically stays. And so then it's next year when it's warm enough again, out they pop. Sometimes when it's really warm, we're seeing some of the bees back there in the holes. It's 60 degrees. I'm going to go out and metamorphose again. And they run through a whole cycle. So you can maybe get 2 or 3 cycles of bees through a long summer. But cool little mandibles that are, watching these guys in motion is a cool little thing. I've seen them on my beans in my backyard. They're great summer pollinators. And you can see, so here's the pollen, or I'm sorry, the leafy bits, and they'll chewed up masticated leafy bits to separate the cocoons. And at the tail end of their chamber, or the end of the hole, in a mason bee, thick plug of mud, in a leafcutter bee, probably like 60 to 70 little tiny perfectly cut circles that are just put in there. So, and every cell, the back, I didn't say this earlier, the back side of your tubes, the bees know where they're at. And if they're going to put a female, they're always at the back of the hole. So that sperm that they got from the guy a couple weeks ago, they're going to go out and put, I missed my word. They know whether it's going to be a female or male. And so the unfertilized eggs are on the outside where birds can get to them. Typically, 2 females to 3 males is roughly what happens, with the females mostly being the fertilized eggs are on the inside chambers. All species of solitaries will do that to you. And again, same pollination, honeybee versus they're just spreaders versus kind of pollen takers. And then the cool thing about the leafcutter bee that we carry is naturalized. It's not native. We just don't have enough yet. And the alfalfa industry back in the 50s only used honeybees. And what you find is when a honeybee sits on the keel, this flower separates and goes bam, and just slaps them in the face. And honeybees really don't like that, okay? And so they really don't like pollinating alfalfa. And so when they brought these bees in from Europe that just can take a beating, man, he just nails the bee in the face, and they're fine with it and gather pollen. And so the leaf cutter industry is predominantly an alfalfa industry. So all 98% of alfalfa is pollinated with the leafcutter bee. Megacali pugnata is the species. Okay, so any questions on leafcutter bees at all before I bounce? Mary?
Yes. We have
Hi,
one.
I'm Hope. Do the leafcutter bees and mason bees live together, or do they? Not together, but I mean,
Yes, it's a good question. Technically, they're both alive because one's a larva and one's a bee, but actively flying. Your spring bees are typically, depends upon the species, the mason bees that we carry come out right when your dandelions come out, so early, and your leaf cutters, and the mason bees are dead within 6 to 8 weeks, and your leaf cutters are typically past that, maybe 4 or 5 weeks past that. If you ordered from us, you tell us when to ship you the bees, and so we can ship bees at the right time. And if you want your leaf cutters to show up, May 1st, we have taken the incubation out of that cycle for you, and so we give live bees. So in the field, there's a difference. And even then, shifting to 4,000 species of native bees across North America, roughly 1,000 of them are cavity nesters. And so some are coming out early, some are coming out mid-early, some are, you know, all through the year you have bees just showing up at different times. And it is, you know, a awesome yard has 4 or 5 species using varied size holes. Good question.
But the bees won't go in the same hole.
Typically not. And yes, you know, if I say typically was the word, I'm a mason bee and I was using kind of a smaller hole, and I finished my hole halfway through the reed. So maybe, you know, 3 inches is left and I'm dead. A leaf cutter has no clue who used it and has a 3-inch hole, and they'll put their eggs on the outside of it. And in that horrible little arrangement, next spring, the mason bees come out beforehand. They just plow right through the leafcutter bees and kill them all. So it's like, if you are purposely raising these bees in your yard, we give advice of, hey, pull the mason bee stuff out and put fresh stuff out for the leafcutter. So we are giving that little advice to maybe dodge that conflict. But I think in life, conflict occurs. Good question.
And in our chat room, we have someone who asked that you please address people buying lots of flowering plants from the big box stores, i.e. Walmart's.
Oh yeah. And everyone wants to make money and everyone wants to sell, but they, I get frustrated with hybrids out there and non-heirlooms. The whole piece of neonicotinoids, and when you're actually growing acres of marigolds, nature doesn't like monoculture, and they move pests in, and people don't want to buy pest-ridden flowers. So of course you've got to spray. And while they might have been maybe safe, we do know that neonicotinoids, as they systematically come into the pollen, it's not healthy for the bees. We know that memory loss occurs. There's a lot of things there. And where science hasn't really even talked about it is the neonicotinoids, as it's in the groundwater plumes moving through your yard, what damage we're doing to the underground insect and microbial systems down there, I don't think is studied, and I think is a mess. And so I would be an advocate of a mixed yard. I would say get some beautiful showy things and maintain them, and then get some natives. And maybe, you know, natives aren't always beautiful, but they're certainly super useful to the bees. So I'm not saying one or the other. I'm saying both. Was that it?
I think that's it for right now.
Okay. Just a couple programs, you know, so bee buyback is one. We work with community gardens and schools and stuff that we're teaming with a lot of places to provide things to teach. We teamed with Cornell a couple of years ago. We've got curricula now for high school curricula. We're working with Iowa State to make sure this is NGSS certified. We're working with Iowa to create more curricula for kindergarten through other ages. You'll find this under our website, crownmedia.com programs. And so there's some cool stuff there, a lot of resources, and it's free. You know, Cornell put this together. It's very accurate knowledge of a lot of things. So this messy page here, collaboration. I firmly believe that the rising tide floats all boats. And so all these little arrows, it's kind of funny. We've been teaming with the Honeybee Conservancy. Now they changed to the Bee Conservancy. And they said, hey, Dave, you should reach out to Be Informed. Oh, I spoke with, this is honeybee only. Dave, you should talk with Project APSM. So we reached out to them. They're only honeybees. I said, hey, you know, Dave, you should reach out to Monarch Joint Venture. Oh my gosh, we're now members of them. And they pointed his fingers over there. And so all of these little arrows, it's important to my company that we are efficient in our approaches. Okay. And so while P2, these guys impact the Farm Bill, and these guys have bee-friendly farming. It's really great. We've introduced these guys to rescape, a commercial landscaping, something that believes in regenerative farming in commercial landscapes. So at a Microsoft campus. And so all of California is being certified. All your landscapers are certified through this. They have to do these things. And we've introduced these guys to these guys, okay? And now they're kind of teammates. And so it's like, wherever we can, if we can help our teammates across the planet be more efficient, then my company has won, or I've won. We've all won, okay? And even these are competitors, main competitors of mine. Rent Mason Bees, you can rent them. I don't always trust what they do, but I know their purveyor really well. And these guys are a lot smaller than us. But I share what I'm doing with them because I need them successful. And if these guys sell crappy things to people, then no one's going to want them. So, you know, collaboration to my company is important. And so it's vital. I'm on calls all the time, just trying to pass what I've learned to others. And this is, I just did this slide a couple hours ago. Bee habitat is not just flowers. Because if you think about it, when you throw flowers outside, 90% of the bees live within 300 feet of those flowers, okay? So that ground down next to the flowers can't really be full of chemicals and can't have weed blocks. It can't just be lawn and asphalt. So we've got to think through, you know, 90% of the bees, you know, a quarter of those are going to live in holes. And if there's no holes, you've just thrown seeds out there. Really, all you're feeding are butterflies, yeah, and then honeybees and bumblebees, the socials, the long distance flyers. And so I've got legislatively, Washington State has this now as bee habitat is, it's not just flowers, but it's also, you know, places to live. I mean, you think about it in the humans aspect, oh, hey, here's your human habitat and I give you some mac and fries. No, we need a house. We need more than that. One of the pieces with Apis mellifera, the honeybee, all of these researchers, if you're going to do research on just one bee, what would it take energy-wise to try 2 or 3 bees in the same piece that you're doing? Yeah, and a bunch of them said, oh, you know, we hadn't really thought about that. We could get some extra bees and try this pesticide on those extra bees while we're at it. So expand without, you know, writing all this brand new pieces. And then we're now, I'm on the board with a couple different organizations. If we can educate, just like tonight, but educate classrooms, create an awareness that there's more than one bee in the world, and none of the native bees of North America make honey. It's just the education, I think, can help spread, I don't know, make a better world. Yeah. Okay. And then here's kind of a little fun. These are, it's kind of a funny slide. Okay. Wait, okay, I'm going to keep this. I am going to stop sharing for a second. So now you're going to just see me. Okay. Okay. So, not that long ago, 2-3 months ago, New Jersey Institute of Technology, I got this researcher calls me up. He says, hey, could you send me a whole lot of a species of bees? Well, what are you doing? And this is LiDAR. Okay. So, we have LiDAR in our cars now, so it's ground penetrating. He has this one transmitter. It's about 2 inches round, and 40 meters out there across the meadow is a receiver. And in this cone, he's able to see things pierce that cone. And his LiDAR is so stinking awesome. He can tell that a mosquito is going through there is carrying eggs. Wow. Okay. And so he said, hey, could you give me a bunch of species of you know, a bunch of, so I sent him males and then only females, like 25 each of the things, and he puts them in his box and he's analyzing through his AI how these bees are flying. So he's can now recognize 4 species now, males and females, as they go through this cone. And his whole intent is, can you put these up in field? He says, I got 1 million occurrences, meaning birds, grasshoppers went through these little things. He goes, we're later on going to be able to put these up, just kind of monitor. Okay. Yeah, okay, really cool. So I introduced, I'm at my USDA people around me, and I mentioned this to Diana Kosfoxer. She's the lead lab down in the Western US. She goes, oh my gosh, this is huge. Yeah, okay, it's really cool technology. Okay, next one, Bee Safe products. It's not, the study's not out yet. So Texas University, when you look at neonicotinoids, everyone says, oh, everyone knows they're bad. Everyone says smoking's not a good thing. So smoking is less and less, right? We know neonics are on their way out, but your big companies know this, and the Bayers of the world are creating new pesticides or insecticides and stuff that are on their way up. And so the next family is they're being so careful on be safe, okay? And they said, hey, do you have any extra Osmia lignaria mason bees? Yeah, I do. What's going on? And so I talked through the protocol, and they had 8 cages, maybe, I don't know, 10 by 10 or whatever, in a row. And this one's all the controls all done perfectly. And this one down here, they put this new chemical systemic, they put it in the ground per recommendations. And they went to put the bees on it. Every mason bee died within 3 days. Okay, just 10 feet away. And they said, we got to make sure, we had to make sure that what we're doing is right. So could you give us some new bees? How many thousands do you want? So, I sent them a couple hundred, and okay. So point is not, there's more than one bee as you're doing research, Michigan State, heat stressed plants. What they just concluded, when you throw these big heat domes down, and if you actually look at the pollen created in that heat dome where it's excessive heat, the pollen gathered by the bees and the nectar isn't healthy to the larva. And you're actually getting larvae that don't make it because the pollen that they're getting is not normal pollen. So interesting. She was a pre-doc working on this, but it was a pretty cool research. I just saw that. So at our Orchard Bee Association, lots of talking of, oh, look, we're finding this disease out from all the, and it's in the larva, and they're finding all these diseases that are being carried by the bee. And I'm sometimes not a nice person. I said, hey, you guys, so what? Oh, it's really not a good word. So what? What can I do about this? And well, what do you mean? I said, so all right, so I know that spiratus something kills bees, but what can I do to look for this? And all of a sudden, kind of little light bulbs go. I said, well, we'll go work on this, but maybe 5 or 6 years from now, maybe we'll have solutions. But it's like, okay, so the world is finally shifting from only honeybees to starting to look at other pollinators, which is cool. Around you guys specifically, Kate Lafron, really cool researcher out of, I think she was out of NC State. They're studying, you have a Japanese orchard bee is this brown mason bee. It's all over where you guys are at, way more than the blue orchard, the black one. They're seeing that with the cute little Osmia cornifrons is this Osmia taurus that looks identical, same cocoon as a brown bee, but the only difference is if you pull the animals apart, there's like a little pushy piece that kind of is in the middle. That's the taurus, and it's really ramping up and replacing. They think other species that are coming out at that same time of the year are decreasing because this thing is just so prolific. She's raising her hands, what do we, and we're finding this kind of up in the Northeast. And then her statement to my industry, well, here it is. And I wasn't real nice again. I said, hey, I don't mean to be rude, but isn't a bee a bee? Okay, and actually that floated back at me for the next couple of days. Oh yeah, because what Hunter says, a bee is a bee. But if it's going everywhere, I can't get rid of the honeybee. I can't get rid of the cherry tree or the apples. And so, so it's interesting research. And the last little one, this is okay, last little piece here is you take the spring bee and you guys watch the life cycle where right now and I'm going to go a little technical on you. As the larva changes into an adult bee, right around in your perfect temperature, so the Carolinas, I don't know what you have, maybe late 80s or by September, that bee finishes the adult, and then 3 weeks later it adjusts from absorbing carbohydrates to now I am surviving off my stored fats in my body. So for the rest of the winter, my fuel tank was full September 15th, okay? And now I'm going to survive, and by the time spring shows up, my fuel tank is maybe 20%. This is normal, okay? Now, take a superheated summer where all of a sudden your temperatures are 10 degrees higher. That bee that used those heat, BTUs to get to adult maturity by September, whoa, that bee actually finished late August or some mid-August, so a month ahead of time, did its conversion. And so all of a sudden for that next month in that heat, whereas I started 100% tank in a really warm environment, I am consuming through my stored fats. So by the time normal fall shows around, I'm maybe at 50% or something. And now I've got to survive off that 50% through the winter. I might not make it. And so what we just found, so here's this reason, this is only a 2-week-old statement. We found people around us, more Portland based, they're opening their wood trays or their reeds, and they're finding adult live mason bees already out of their cocoons. I kind of finished my energy. I'm kind of ready to go, and they're just sitting there. They're dead. Had they just stayed there, they would have just starved and died through the whole winter. But what this says, and this one guy, he had maybe 900 cocoons, and maybe 70 or 80 of these bees were out. It's like, oh dear, so climate change, no one studied this. I reached out to Teresa Pittsinger, Dr. Pittsinger out of the USDA lab. We kind of chatted about it. She goes, oh, wow. I said, I think it's replicable. I think you can go out and study this. And I've got 4 or 5 people down there, south of me, but I think this is something that should be studied. And so my company is going to try to create awareness to, let's just see what we can study about this. I mean, that's, it is what it is, but anyway, okay, so those are cool. Those things geek me out. That's why okay, I'm done. There's the show. Questions?
So there's one that asked that you inform people about mosquito spray and its impact, of course, on the bees and all of the other insects in our world.
In my walk, it's uglier than that. And your whole group there already is aware that Insectageddon, or whatever we want to call it, Germany concluded 8 years ago, maybe, that they think there's been an 80% loss of biomass on the pristine reserves in Germany. They had 27 years of biomass gathering, and they saw this huge 80% shrink down to about maybe 5 years ago. And they said, hey, rest of the world, who else has been doing these types of studies? And no one had that depth of studies. And so I think the conclusion of Germany, which is actually, they really care, and they've been trying to change what they're doing. I think there's a 70 to 80% loss of insects around the world due to our humans. And this is, I don't like Zika, so I'm doing aerial spraying. Every living flying insect dies. You'll catch in the news that Mrs. Johnson's 8 hives, they failed because they flew over her, but they're only caring about the honeybee. They're not caring about the dragonflies or the ladybugs or the native bees. And so while we don't want to get encephalitis, I mean, they're scary things, but I think up in the Northeast, we're worried about, the deer tick diseases and it's just that aerial bombing. I think with mosquitoes, they're starting to get more genus specific. And so I think some of the more recent mosquito-y stuffy is a little more careful, but you go out to Cuba and I'm told there's nothing that flies. You know, they make sure nothing, there's no mosquitoes out there spreading malaria or whatever, but as a result, you find nothing there. And people ask, I saw your slide earlier on. I absolutely appreciate that you showed it. Less insects has less birds. The Southeast a couple years ago said, hey, we're finding less amphibians. I wonder why. I mean, it's a big sigh. So I'm not an advocate of, in my yard, I do nothing and things still grow. And I wear spray on my body if I need to, but that's me. Good question. Lecture. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
I have a question, Dave. This is Jana. So when you grow these solitary bees and you release them, say for somebody to pollinate their orchard or whatnot, how do you get them back and bring them back home?
So in a yard, let's just go there, a small orchard, you've released them. In general, they want to hang around your house. If the yard has pollen in it, there's mud available and the yard is not super smelly type stuff, they're going to nest there back in reeds. And so this reed here, I'm going to crack it. Okay, I'm going to get mud all over my keyboard. But in this hole are next year's bees. And so I'm storing these things and they're my bees for next spring. So they're going to nest, and in a farmland, a little bigger scale, we work with a little differently, but same concept. The bees that nested there are now next year's bees are in these wood trays or reeds, and they're used that way.
Thank you.
There's another question. Can we use plastic straws for tubes or just breathable paper/wood?
Oh, the word you just used, breathable, said it all. Funny, nature doesn't make plastic. The pollen mass that was gathered by the bee is moist, and as the cocoons are going and everything, the excess moisture is wicked away by the reed or the wood or the paper tube. And in a plastic environment, one, you can't open them up really too well. And two, we just find a lot of moldy things, just the moisture kills the bees. And you successfully can do it. I mean, it does happen, but my company tries to lean in on the organic, sustainable path. We're trying to, as a company, get rid of all plastics. And I can't get rid of them all, but where I can, you'll go to my website, and if you look at product stories, we've got a brand new thing, a cocoon comb that's made out of, we know the specific boat that their excess ropes, fishing gear, was turned into pellets and molded into our plastic thing. So we're very careful with what we're doing.
I applaud you for that. I think that's fantastic. There's another question. How many bees do you need for suburban half-acre lot?
It depends on what you're doing. Okay. I always think with my wallet, my personal wallet, I would always go small and proof of concept. When we send out our mason bees, you're getting per order like 20 cocoons. That's roughly 8 females and stuff. That's enough to kind of get going. If they all flew away, you didn't spend a lot of money on there, but to the bee, they're flying in a 6-acre radius, 300 feet. Okay. So you can probably support a couple hundred to 500 maybe of these bees. In my backyard, I've got a hill of big leaf maples, and these things have this huge pollen pods that just drip pollen everywhere. When I have, I'm the owner, so I can put a lot of bees out there. And so I have thousands of bees flying. When that spigot turns off, my yard only supports about 300 bees. So all of a sudden those thousands of bees, they laid a lot of eggs at this point, but they all went, okay. So, I mean, the bees will let you know. But I'd say always start with 1 or 2 orders max, and just see how they do.
Okay, we have one more question.
This is Michelle again. Thank you so much. You've probably gotten this question with each of your lectures you've done, but I recently saw a show about the giant bee-killing wasps, particularly in the Northwest. Are they a threat to the solitary bees? And can you just let us know what the
Okay,
status is today?
when I had my Houdini fly conversation with Laura Sue out of Wazoo today, Washington State University, I just talked, oh my gosh, the genius of marketing. Man, that is the murder hornet. Oh, it kills our sacred honeybee. Ooh, okay. And it is a nasty ass thing. It's real big, it's huge. And I haven't, I mean, I think they've eradicated, I think there was like 3 cells. I think they've got them all. But the marketing of that was just wonderful. And everyone cares about the murder hornet. And it only really impacts, could wipe out a bumblebee colony maybe, because it needs a lot of food in one place. And your solitaries, not even a challenge. And so in my discussion with Laura Sue today was everyone's focusing on this one hornet, and the one that's wiping out millions of bees, and there's nothing we can do about it, is a stupid Houdini fly. Help me research this. And the answer kind of came down to, well, Dave, show me the money. The honeybee people have money, and your native people don't. And so good luck getting that studied. It's like, that's all you can do. But there's your answer. Doesn't impact it. And I think it's a really cool insect, that the murder hornet. If you're out there in the brush and it's a jungle where they're up in the north part of the state, if you can see one fly, and they fly right straight line right back to their nest, and you just sit on your cell phone and you know where you're at, and you triangulate that distance, and so 2 or 3 of these lines pinpoints miles away, bunk right there, and you've now got maybe 1/8 of a mile radius that you're looking for this thing. So it's pretty easy to triangulate and track down. So I think they've cared. They don't want to have this thing get out, and it would impact the honeybee industry. So I think you're at the none left, but okay, that was me being defensive for my bee.
Don't blame you. The Houdini fly, what does it do to the bee? Does it parasitize it, or what does it do to kill it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, it's a fruit fly, and so, oh my gosh, there's so much. Put in all of your mason bee houses, holes in one space. This isn't natural. Humans are working against nature. Normally in nature, these holes are, all through a yard and in acres. And so by amassing all this food in one spot, how awesome is it that the flies they're really slow. You can just smush them with your finger. They just sit on the outside and just wait till the female leaves, and they go run there and lay their egg, and then the next. So they're just laying eggs all through there, and these eggs immediately hatch. They consume all the pollen. It's a pollen insect, and it kills the egg that was laid there, and then it's been sealed in that little chamber, and it's now just a bunch of maggots sitting there. And the reason it's called Houdini fly, in this little chamber in the spring. So it sits as a maggot right now. If you open these things up, there's a maggot, and a bunch of maggots, like 10 or 12 in a little chamber. As it goes through into the spring, it now metamorphoses into a juvenile, and they've got these hydraulic heads that it 1 or so in this little chamber will push its head against that little mud, and then swell its head up, and a little piece of mud goes, okay, and then just works its way, this little battering ram, and it keeps on. It's a hydraulic head, just goes, and it finally gets its way out, and then so it's Houdini. It escapes from its chamber, and then they all kind of go out that hole to the next chamber, and that juvenile will will release them, or mason bees will just tunnel through and release them. But that's its life cycle, and it's perfectly matched with no predators in this country. It's perfectly matched with the spring mason bee. It's like,
And one last question with the pollen study that you did, or that someone did, I should
Mhm.
say.
Mhm.
What did they determine about the pollen? That was it not viable? I mean, did it not work for pollinating plants?
Gosh, what was her name? Kendra, I think. Jenna Walters, Michigan State. Okay, now I'm going to wing this. It's not good. I think you had a reduced sized bees. I don't think they died, but it was the very first preliminary study. And so they had taken whatever plants, they just put them in a superheated envelope and then pulled the pollen out of the plant and made little pollen patties and fed them to the bees. And this is, I think she's a pre-doc. I think it's being worked on, and the statement is it's not good. I don't have the technical answer, so I kind of, sorry about that. If you do care, send info@crownbees.com. Send me an email, and I'll go technically find that out for you and get that back to you. So I heard it, and it's kind of like one in and out the other ear. Sorry.
Well, thank you very much. I think that
Covers it all?
summarizes all the questions. Yes, and you did a
Okay.
fantastic job. We really appreciate you joining us.
Well, I wish I
this
could have seen you all. It'd be much better to be in person, I promise. And after this thing, I'd say, who's buying me a beer? But oh well. Have a good evening, folks. Appreciate the conversation.
evening. Thank you.
Bye.